You too?
Washington.
Washington State?
Yeah. We made it! Or like, you know, if anything, I just try like this too. Puppy's so cute. Alrighty, now we're gonna get, oh, there's a pool in the way. We're gonna get on the aqua bus and we're gonna go across this little river thing all the way to Yaletown. Like, what is? We don't even have these. These
They put maple leaves on it to make.
It's
what?
even like a London thing though, but it says Vancouver, Canada. It's like, what?
Look at this beauty. Where'd she go? Oh god. Here. You're gonna be a junior ranger with that hat. Look at all these hockey pucks. Well, there's even other ones too.
Oh. Montreal Canadiens. Carolina Hurricanes. Canada kids. So they sell golf clubs, not golf clubs, these little golf balls things here with little like maple leaves, and they sell school buses, and they sell these little guys. And their ears pop off. I mean, not their ears, their little like thingies. Here, I have one in my hand. Look, ready? Oh, his eye pops out. Hi. Yes.
All these people taking photos, so I guess we should take one too. Whoa. That? I thought it was like a huge thing. No, it's not that big. Look, it's like steaming. Stop it. Focus. Okay, so we just had dinner and now we're gonna go on a tour because we can't be tourists without going on a tour. So this is gonna be like a tour about some haunted places at Gastown. Yeah. So we're really excited about that and hopefully it'll be fun and not boring and hopefully we feel like real tourists today.
Are we sisters from another
Mister?
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're from Vancouver, Washington, okay? Jones. Our house is yellow. We are sisters. We are famous YouTubers. And okay, we came here on a business trip, and during our business trip, we're going on tours and being sightseeing. Everything. Got it? No. Yes.
Oh, look, I think there's people here. Oh, there's so much more.
He's our tour guide. He's our tour guide.
Oh, wow. And are you two living in Vancouver right now? Just
for a business.
for work?
We can't do this. You have to think of a better cover story.
We're here visiting our couples.
You too?
Washington.
Washington State?
Yeah.
State or DC?
Bro! DC.
DC, okay. But it wasn't actually constructed until 1977. This is during a time when the city was putting up... That I could beat it. Pub, and above it and next door is the Dominion Hotel. So first I'm going to tell you about the Lamplighter. So the Lamplighter opened in 1899, stands as probably one of the oldest bars in the city. And the main stories that we get from that place are things like poltergeist activity. For example, after hours when it's just the skeleton crew doing the final cleanup, they will watch as a glass will lift itself off the rack above the bar, float for a second, and then fly across the room, shattering against the opposite wall. There's a lot of ducking involved. Aside from that, we also have the standards, ghost voices, ghostly apparitions, you know, the usual. Gastown is a federally protected heritage site, which is why you see a lot of these heritage plaques on these buildings here. So it can no longer be touched. One of the families that helped to fight against the city was the Poulos family, and they are the ones that opened this branch of the old spaghetti factory. Now, the Poulos family were big lovers of the history and heritage of the city of Vancouver, so much so that when it came time to install the traditional trolley car into the restaurant, instead of building a fake one, they decided to grab one of the original streetcars that ran in the city of Vancouver, because at the same time that they were opening the restaurant, the city was pulling the local streetcar system off the road. So that's where they saw their opportunity. So they grabbed British Columbia Electric Company car number 53, which is inside the restaurant, and literally just pushed it through one of the open doors. Now, the trolley car inside of which you can, of course, dine in, did not have come alone. There have been several reports of people seeing a man pacing back and forth inside the streetcar, dressed in what looks like a blue conductor's outfit. It's also been reported that diners inside the streetcar have felt their shoulders being grazed or their hair being played with. Staff will come in the next morning to find that the cutlery that they've set so neatly the night before on the tables is now kind of knocked all over the place. This next apparition inside the OSF is so significant and so common that anytime he's seen, staff have to write an incident report for it. This is that of a little boy. And as far back as we can tell, the earliest sighting of him was about 9 years ago. A female staffer was setting cutlery up on one of the tables after closing for the next day, when she hears a little giggle behind her. She turns around and finds that there's a little boy, probably no older than maybe 7, standing right behind her, dressed as if he was plucked right out of a Charles Dickens novel. So she reaches for him. The boy turns around and runs away. So she chases after him all the way to the back of the restaurant, where she sees the boy dive under a table. So she goes to the table, gets on her hands and knees and lifts up the tablecloth, only to find the boy sitting cross-legged, staring at her. Now he's staring at her with what should have been his own eyes, but were instead deep black holes where his eyes should have been. So she drops the cloth, runs to the front of the restaurant, rips off her apron, slams it on the front podium, and has not set foot in this restaurant since. Now, the final reason this area is known as Blood Alley has to do with the building that I was standing in front of previously. The building is called the Alhambra. Today, it's a series of office spaces, but back in the 19th century, it was known as the Alhambra Hotel. A very, very fancy, high-class hotel. 4 poster beds, fireplaces in every unit. Offered almost every amenity you could think of, including late-night female companionship. In that time period, when you were a woman working in that particular trade, every so often you would get an accident. And of course, at that time, you couldn't just walk up to a doctor and ask for them to help you out with it. So the women of the Alhambra had to seek out the person who had the most appropriate tools for that job. And more often than not, those were the butchers. So the women of the Alhambra would come back here where they would meet with butchers to perform back alley abortions. Now, this next story actually comes from a friend of mine who used to work in transit security here. See, our local transit company, TransLink, which is of course our public transit system, has kind of a contract with Waterfront Station that allows all the SkyTrains to converge here. This is the terminus station for all of our SkyTrain lines. And at each station, TransLink provides their own body of security. So there's always a security person at every SkyTrain station. Now, to work for transit security here at Waterfront Station specifically, they sit you down and they show you the specific piece of security footage. A hazing, if you will. In this footage, it shows the main foyer of Waterfront Station after closing. And in it, you see a security guard walking from the west side of the building towards the middle, just kind of minding his own business. When suddenly, from the bottom of the frame, a balloon appears and begins to float and move at the same direction, at the same rate that the guard is moving. Now, it's apparent that the guard never reacts to the balloon, so it's most likely just in his blind spot. But as the two are moving in conjunction with each other, it finally gets to the point where it seems like the guard is going to catch sight of this balloon. But then the balloon stops in midair, and the guard continues walking, turns to his left, heads into the direction of the C-bus, and falls out of frame. When that happens, the balloon continues to move, curves to the left, and then floats in the direction that the guard had just come from. Above us, we have 2 levels of office space. Here on the main floor, we have our various restaurants, Row, A&W, Starbucks. Downstairs, we have our SkyTrain platforms, and then we also have 2 sub-basements that are closed off to the general public. Now, these sub-basements, which at one point were opened when the passenger trains would come in and out of Waterfront, have things like old offices, old waiting areas, bathrooms, kitchens. But since, of course, that is no longer necessary, it's all closed off, everything's shut down, it's pitch black down there. But it's still part of the security guard's jobs to go down there, make sure that no one's down there. There shouldn't be. And all they have with them are their flashlights. So it gets a little spooky. One night, this one guard was doing a little bit of exploring, as some of the night guards usually do. And as he's wandering around, shining his light around, he walks into one of these old commercial kitchens, and he rounds a corner, and then he stops. Directly in front of him, his light shining right on her face, is an old woman. And she's staring over his right shoulder with this look of frozen terror on her face. And after what seemed like minutes, but probably only a few seconds, she shifts her gaze, and they lock eyes with each other. And then she screams in his face. So the guard turns around and books it out. He clocks out, goes home, lays down to fall asleep, but unfortunately never had the restful sleep that he was hoping for. Because that night, and for the next 2 weeks, he would have a recurring nightmare of this woman. But not just in his dreams. He's seeing her everywhere. He's seeing her in reflections of windows, in reflections of mirrors, in puddles of water on the street. He is being haunted by this figure. Eventually, he resolves to himself that he has to come up with some way of ridding him of this haunting. Now, he's a fairly accomplished painter, so he goes to an art store, restocks a few of his supplies, goes home, sets up a brand new canvas, and begins to work on a portrait of this woman. When he finishes the portrait, he brings it back here to Waterfront Station, goes back down to that same kitchen, and sets it on the counter. And from that moment forward, he had never had another visit of a woman.